Okay, let's discuss what is friction, and we have already discussed a little bit of this concept when we discussed the types of forces. So you might have an idea that friction is basically a type of force, but what exactly is friction? This is something what we'll be focusing upon in this video. So let's actually start with an example. Let's consider a ball that is resting on a level ground. Okay, let me actually have a better attempt to draw this level ground surface here. Okay, this will do. So we have a ball that is, resting on a level ground, and we just roll the ball forward by applying a little bit of force on that, right? So we apply some force, and by definition of the force, we know that the net external force that we apply or exert on something, it will cause the velocity of that thing to change. So initially it was resting at zero velocity, so initially its velocity was 0 meters per second, and then we applied some force to it, so its velocity changes from 0 meter per second to some positive value. So it goes from from 0 to like 2 or 3 meters per second, and then you observe the ball rolling forward, right? As well as skidding if the track is a little bit smooth. But then you just eventually observe the ball to come to a stop, right? So you observe the ball or any object that you apply or exert some force upon, never to be having a infinitely lengthy motion. It does not just keep going forever. It eventually comes to a stop. You can just try it yourself. You can just have a ball and just put it on the floor and then just roll the ball forward, and you will observe the ball to eventually come to a stop. Why does this happen? What actually makes the ball to come to a stop? Because we, by definition, know that there has to be a force that is needed to change the velocity of something. So its velocity, as you just apply the force to it, its velocity, for example, increases to 3 meters per second, but then soon it decreases to 2 meters per second, and then to, let's say, 1 meters per second, and then again to 0 meters per second. So it comes to a rest at this, let's say, point B, and it started from point A, right? So its velocity, instantly increased when you apply the force, but then it's gradually decreased to zero. But we know that there has to be a force that actually is required in order to change the velocity of something, and we can observe the velocity of this ball to be changing from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. So there we must be sure that there has to be a force that is applied in the opposite direction to the direction of the motion of the ball. The direction of the motion of the ball towards the right side, right? But the force that is exerted on this ball is definitely exerted on the left side, right? So that the velocity actually has been caused to decrease, right? So there has to be a force that was constantly exerted on this ball in the opposite direction, that actually caused the deceleration of the ball, right? So we need to investigate what that force is. And by a lot of observation and experiments, we come to know that there is an abstract concept of force of friction that is involved in such scenarios, that there's a resistive force. There's a force that resists or impedes the motion of the ball, and it helps the ball to actually come to a stop. So the first thing that we come to know about this resistive force, or force of friction, which we name it, is that it impedes the motion. It impedes the motion of anything, right? So it impedes the motion of anything. That impedes means to actually resist or stop the motion, right? So it actually impedes the motion. It does not just allow the ball to actually keep going in that velocity. It is acting against the direction of the motion, and hence, as a force is acting against the direction of the motion, it will cause the ball to decelerate, and we actually know this by Newton's first law and second law. So we know that there has to be a force that is acting in the opposite direction, that actually uh, is there all the time, that actually helps the ball to come to a stop. So let's actually imagine a world where this force of friction did not exist. So in that case, what would happen? The ball will forever be going forward, and it will never come to a stop. And you can think of it this way, that whenever you walk on the ground, you had some contact with the surface, and you push the ground back. So I can just try my best to draw a. Okay, that's not a good foot. I was trying to draw a foot, for example, right? So you just you're just walking on the ground. You push the ground backwards, and in return you move forward. So that is a classical example of Newton's third law being followed. But have you ever wondered that what actually is happening whenever you push the ground backward? There is a contact between your foot and the ground, and then there's a traction, and then not attraction, it's just a traction, like a contact, right? So there's a contact of your foot with the floor, and then you push it backwards, and in return you go forward. And the assumption that we take in order to understand the process of walking is that the floor must be a little bit rough. It does not have to be absolutely smooth. Let's imagine you're walking on ice and you're wearing some, I don't know, some, a shoes that a shoe that is, that sole is made up of, let's say plastic or let's say steel or something, which is a pretty smooth material, and you're walking on ice or very oiled surface. In that case, it will be pretty smooth and it will be very hard for you to walk, and you'll keep getting slipped, and you won't be actually able to walk because there is no proper contact or traction between your foot and the floor. So we assume the floor to be a little bit rough so that you have that contact and traction between your foot and the floor, right? So the real reason that you're able to walk on the ground is the force of friction, because whenever you just push the floor backwards, there is a traction between your foot and the floor, and there's a force of friction that actually is developed there. And if that force of friction is not there, you will just slip, because as we consider the case of the ball, and we analyze that if there is no force of friction, the ball will forever be going forward, because there won't be any force that actually impedes the motion. In this case, the ground actually, the force of friction really tries you to, it really wants you to stop the motion right there. It really wants you to impede your motion. So that is why you get a solid contact with the floor, and then you just push the floor backwards, and in return the floor actually successfully pushes you forward, and you are able to walk. If there was no force of friction, you would never be able to push the floor backwards. You would keep slipping there, and you will never be able to walk, because then you won't be actually exerting any backward force on the ground, and in return the ground won't be actually exerting a forward force on you, and you won't be able to walk. So thanks to force of friction, it exists, and you're able to walk, you're able to sit, you're able to stand, you're able to do everything. All of our physical phenomena that are happening around us are a consequence of the existence of the force of friction. So it is a pretty important force that exists. All the forces are important, but this is one of the most important forces. Without friction, the world wouldn't actually exist, right? So first thing that we learn about the force of friction is that it impedes the motion of anything, and the next thing that we're going to analyze or observe from the example is that it produces heat, right? So produces heat almost in all the cases, right? So why does that happen? We will actually be talking in detail about the mechanism with which the force of friction works in the next video, but let's actually give it a little touch here. Whenever there is a contact between two surfaces, the molecules are actually colliding with each other, and as they collide with each other, they bounce back and forth, and hence their kinetic energy increases. And once they want to lose that kinetic energy, because everything in this universe wants to gain stability, they lose their kinetic energy in the form of heat energy. So energy converts from one form to another, and hence stays conserved. But the important thing is that in order to lose the kinetic energy that is produced due to the collision of the molecules when they are in contact with another surface, they get a lot of kinetic energy, and then they want to lose that kinetic energy in the form of heat energy, so that heat energy dissipates into the environment, and the state of the molecules of that object gets closer to stability, right? So it always results in production of some heat. So these are a couple of points that I wanted to mention about force of friction, and you always need to keep them in mind whenever you are considering the force of friction acting upon any surface. In the further details and the accurate mechanism, how the friction works, all those things will actually be discussed in the upcoming videos.